All right. So shall we start?
Mhm.
Speak, Lord, for your servants are listening.
Amen.
All right. So if you don't mind starting, well, we're on 19 up to verse 7, if that's all right.
Okay. And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul my father seeks to kill you. Therefore be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father, and said to him, Let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before.
Yes. So when we last left our heroes, David had become Saul's son-in-law, but Saul's he's going to spend the rest of this book on the uh, kind of pendulum swinging back and forth about his opinions about David and some other things, I think, as well. He's becoming more and more unstable, I think. And so David's in a bit of a pickle at the moment. So as much as Saul is in fact telling his servants to keep an eye on him so he can kill him, but we see here that Jonathan remains loyal to David and seems to be absent all selfish motives. In a way, Jonathan's relationship to David is like some of the Johns in the New Testament, John the Baptist or the Apostle John. He's like John the Baptist in that he very much believes that he must become less and David must become greater. We saw last time that he gave him his armor and all of his stuff. And he is a bit like the Apostle John in that he is sort of the one that David loves. There's a great friendship there that is, well, it's one of the few stories of like friendship between like two humans that we see in the Bible. Like so much of the Bible is about like parent-child relationships or brotherly relationships and relationships between people and God that we don't often see just like regular old friendships. And we can also see that Jonathan is putting the best construction on things, which is a valuable thing to remember. Of course, in Luther's explanation of the Eighth Commandment, we should always seek to put the best construction on things.
I see him like a mediator.
Yeah, that's also a good point. Jonathan is sort of a mediator between David and Saul. We also see a bit of an irony here, and I think it's only going to become more ironic in the next few verses. So I'll wait. You could read up to verse 10.
10, okay. And there was war again. And David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a great blow so that they fled before him. Then a harmful spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. And David was playing the lyre. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul, so that he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night.
So we have an irony here, one that's perhaps hidden from us by the translation, which is that the word sin in the Old Testament means to sort of miss the mark. And so it appears that, Saul has said to himself, well, I'm not going to miss. But of course, he does continue to miss. That is, I'm not going to miss the mark with David this time. I'm really going to get him. But
yeah,
it appears that in this, as in all of his other efforts right now, he seems to, in fact, be missing constantly. Let's continue on to verse 17.
okay. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, if you do not escape with your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled away and escaped. Michal took an image and laid it on the bed, and put a pillow of goat's hair at its head, and covered it with the clothes. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. Then Saul sent the messengers to see David, saying, bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him. And when the messengers came in, behold, the image was in the bed, with the pillow of goat's hair at its head. Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me thus, and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped? And Michal answered Saul, he said to me, let me go, why should I kill you? Okay.
Yes. So there's a couple of interesting questions that this particular passage raises. The first one is, what's up with this image? And
Image, yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have any easy answers for us here. The word that they use here for image is teraphim, which is used also in the book of Genesis. It's the same sort of thing that Rachel steals from her father when they're running away. Although this one seems to be, rather than, the side, instead of being small enough that you could sit on it while you're on a camel, this is in fact large enough that you could pretend that it's a person. Unfortunately, we just don't know very much about what a teraphim actually is. Like we have some stuff in like later rabbinic literature that like says something about them, but I'm not entirely sure that they actually knew any better than we do in terms of what it actually is, because like there doesn't seem to be any evidence that like people had these at the time when that later writing was written. So I can't really tell you what exactly is up with this thing.
So I mean, maybe it was like a portrait, a drawing or something, or maybe
yeah.
even a statue.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely like when I say image, like it's definitely like a statue.
Like 3D.
Yeah, like it's a three-dimensional image. I guess the real question is like, what is it for? Like, why do David and Michal have one? Because like, it doesn't seem to me like immediately obvious that at this point in their like civilizational development history, that they would just have like statues for no reason, like just for like decoration or something. But on the other hand, if not that, then what for? And the problem is that we don't really know. I mean, there is the possibility that like David is actually staying in like a house that like belongs to Saul and that he was using this for something. But I mean, frankly, we just don't know what's up with this thing. We don't know where it came from, what it was for. Although I think that there is a bit of a sort of implicit mocking that's going on here, that like, oh, like it looks like a human, but it's actually not a human. You know, like it's not even a human. Put a pillow of goat's hair at its head. Oftentimes, goats are used in the context of like a deception or something like that. So it's like, it's pretending to be something that it's really not. But the question of like what exactly is going on here, not entirely clear. Meanwhile, in the realm of definite, clear deception, Michal just is lying to Saul, saying that David threatened to kill her if she didn't let him escape. So David is on the run for now. But David, like Saul, is sort of going back and forth insofar as he's not left Saul for good. Let's continue on to the end of the chapter.
I was going to say, I think Michal must have been pretty strong if she was able to let David down the window.
Yeah, well, she probably had like some servants or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now 18, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 18. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Naioth. And it was told Saul, behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David, and when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as head over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. Other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah and came to the great well that is in Seku. And he asked, where are Samuel and David? And one said, behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah. And he went there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. And as he went, he prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Thus it is said, is Saul also among the prophets?
All right. So you may be remembering in the back of your head, did not Daniel say a couple of weeks ago that Saul and Samuel were never going to see each other again until the day of Samuel's death, and maybe even beyond that? And yes, I did say that because I just forgot about this. However, the real question that we should be asking is, wait a second, didn't the text of the Bible say the exact same thing? And in fact, the ESV at least says, and Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel grieved over Saul, and the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel. So this actually confused me, and it was one of the confusing bits that I was not ready for, because some of these I've seen before, like what's up with the image, I still don't know, but I at least knew that that was coming. But I actually legitimately forgot about this and was like trying to figure out what on earth is actually going on here. And so I came up with two possibilities. One I think is a lot simpler and better, and the other one is weirder and more complicated. So I'll tell both of them, but I think I'd rather go with one that's simpler and less complicated, which is that the ESV just had a hard time translating a phrase that is admittedly kind of hard to translate. Basically, what the Hebrew actually said in that passage was something like, Samuel never again to see Saul. Like, obviously, grammar works differently in different languages, but like, it's kind of a hard phrase to translate. Like, what does that exactly mean? And so I checked another translation and another bit of notes, and they suggested that it would be better translated as Samuel never went to see Saul again. That is, that like in this passage, Saul goes to see Samuel, and Samuel isn't like advising him or anything. He's just there, and Saul begins prophesying while he's there. But Samuel never goes to visit Saul and give him spiritual advice and that sort of thing. So that is the easier answer, and I think it is probably the correct one. The more complicated answer that I don't think is correct is that this actually happened at some other point in time. And if you like try and rearrange it, you could somehow get an order of events that makes sense where this actually happened before the other event. But that is probably just way overcomplicating things. I think that believe it or not, the Holman Christian Standard Bible, I think might actually get this one right. So credit to them for getting one over on the ESV. It's not often that they get my stamp of approval, but I think that that one makes sense at least.
I wonder what all this prophesying is all about. All these guys prophesying, and it's almost like there's this area. You step into this area and you start prophesying.
Well, yeah. I suppose it would be good to actually pay attention to what the text is saying instead of trying to figure out that one bit by itself. So yeah, we see a lot of interesting things here. One is that Samuel seems to have established a sort of theological college in his old age. That is, he has a bunch of other prophets who seem to come and live near him. And he seems to be sort of in charge of them. We see a sort of similar thing happen in the Book of Kings, where it seems that Elijah has a lot of other prophets living nearby, sometimes referred to as like the sons of the prophets. So that seems to be what Samuel has done as his sort of retirement plan. But then the question is, what on earth is going on here? I mean, the simple answer is that God is protecting David from Saul, who intends to go and kill him. We see a lot of interesting things here. Two things that will perhaps make Lutherans think, aha, see, we're right. And one that makes us think, wait, what is going on here? The parts that make us think, see, we're right, is A, the Spirit of God affects Saul without him like giving his permission. Like Saul isn't like, giving like the sinner's prayer or like the please make me a prophet prayer or something like that. The Spirit of God is just like, I'm working now. But then the other thing is that afterwards, the Spirit of God does not remain with Saul. And so we can see, this is proof that we're right. The difficult thing is that the kind of prophecy that he's doing seems to be like very weird and wacky. Like he takes off his clothes and lies naked all day and all that night. So, I mean, it could be that this is a sort of picture prophecy, like you see in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel's always doing wacky stuff in order to demonstrate what God's going to do. Like he has to like lie on his side and eat food that's cooked over cow dung. He has to like make little like dioramas of how the Babylonians are going to come and lay siege to the city, stuff like that. Hosea has to go and like marry a prostitute and then have children that have names like not loved and not my people. So, there is this kind of thing in the Bible. I think that Saul's stripping off of his clothes indicates what we've already heard, which is that his rule is going to be taken away from him. Samuel has already told him as much. And I think that. Pardon?
You don't think he tried to humiliate it?
Yeah, but he's taking the clothes off himself.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's doing it to himself. Yeah. Maybe he just got really hot.
Well, I mean, maybe he's really working himself up. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we have here again the phrase that we heard also, is Saul also among the prophet? The ESV Study Bible suggests that basically what's happening here is that, it's a rhetorical question intended to give a negative reply. Presumably what would happen, I guess, is that, people would say, Saul's, he's the king, he's chosen by God, and people would respond, is Saul also among the prophets? That sort of thing. Like basically the fact that he prophesied for a little bit does not mean that, he's now a prophet forever and you should always listen to what he says. So I guess the idea would be in a similar way, the fact that he was king at one point does not mean that he couldn't be deposed. However, as we'll see slowly, David doesn't really seem to be interested in deposing Saul. He never brings out any sort of self-defense, American law sort of deal. He's just going to kind of run away.
Mhm.
And spoiler warning, just keep running away until Saul dies. Now, does that necessarily mean that that's what we should do? Well, we'll keep that in the back of our minds, I guess, but I'm not going to say that that's the case.
Now, does prophesying always come from God, or can it come from elsewhere?
It can come from elsewhere. Here it specifically says it is the Spirit of God.
Okay.
So in this case, at least, and especially also because, it's like in the presence of Samuel and it's like protecting David, it seems to be specifically that. But we do have a story at the end of First Kings of an evil spirit being sent to a bunch of prophets that are trying to goad the king of the northern kingdom to go into a battle where he will be killed. So there definitely is examples of prophecies that are not from God. And in fact, the Torah, warns the people as much that, like, if somebody says, oh, let's go and serve other gods, you should not listen to such a prophet. And, if somebody prophesies and then what they say is going to happen doesn't happen, then you should not listen to them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some cases where God relents from disaster because of repentance, like in the book of Jonah, for example, but that's different from something just not happening.
Yeah.
All right. Any more thoughts before we move into chapter 20?
Oh.
Okay. Let's go up to verse 3 now.
3. Okay. So chapter 20. Okay. Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said before Jonathan, what have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? And he said to him, far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing either great or small without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so. But David vowed again, saying, your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes, and he thinks, do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death.
Let's actually go to verse 11.
Okay. Then Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. And David said to Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit at table with the king. But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field till the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. If he says, good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that harm is determined by him. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself, for why should you bring me to your father? And Jonathan said, far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, would I not tell you? Then David said to Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you roughly? And Jonathan said to David, come, let us go out into the field. So they both went out into the field.
All right. So this is sort of the tipping point. Jonathan, he's also trying to put the best construction on the on the actions of his own father, but it's one thing to put the best construction on something, it's another thing to just to deliberately be blind. And so Jonathan is going to agree to test his father to see what he actually thinks. The New Moon Festival is one that is obscure enough that I didn't really know anything about it. Like it's occasionally mentioned in the Bible, but I had basically forgotten about it. But it is in the Torah. It seems that, once a month they would have a sort of festival that was like kind of like the Sabbath, kind of like a yearly feast, except it was every month. So the first of every month, you would do no work and have a sacrifice of some sort. It does seem like this is further evidence that there was a variety of places where people were sacrificing at the time. I mean, we see that David intends to go back to, Bethlehem. But meanwhile, they're also doing some sort of new moon festival, where Saul is, which would be in Gibeah, I guess, in the tribe of Benjamin. I guess the reason that I found this feast so confusing is that it's one of the feasts that doesn't really have a parallel with like New Testament worship, because the Passover is sort of like very much associated with like Easter, and like the Feast of Weeks is sort of associated with Pentecost. Is like that's when that would have happened. The Feast of Tabernacles it's not really like temporally associated with Christmas, but like at least like in terms of significance, I guess. I actually have no idea when in the year the Feast of Tabernacles would happen. But then like we don't really do a thing every month. Like that's not really a part of the Christian calendar. There's not necessarily any problem with that, but just a thought. Now, you'll notice that a couple of times in this chapter, they're, kind of swearing oaths, which may lead you to wonder, like, what's the deal with that? Like, did not Jesus say, let your yes be yes and your no be no? But, David will say, truly as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there's but a step between me and death. And there will be another one or two by the time that we get to the end of the chapter. But of course, when Jesus says that, his point isn't that, making an oath in the name of the Lord is somehow like a sin, because the Bible gives directions in the Old Testament for like what you should do when you do something like that. But rather what Jesus is saying is that you should not have to do this. That like if you were just honest all the time, then people would just believe you and you would not have to make oaths. But of course, the Lord even, makes oaths in his own name, as the book of Hebrews says, because there is not a greater one than him that he could swear by. But the Lord is, of course, doing that for our sake and not for his sake, as if he was untrustworthy, but rather because we, in our own sinfulness, have not learned to trust him. All right. Let's continue on from verse 12.
And Jonathan said to David, the Lord, the God of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow on the third day, behold, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan, and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away, that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you, as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of the Lord, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul.
Yes. So we see here, whenever I think of this passage, I think of perhaps the, not to sound too much like a talking head, but the poverty of true male friendships that we have in our society, that people can read this passage and say, oh, they must be gay or something. Like it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But this is something to remember, that like just the word love means more than, romantic infatuation, and that, you know, is they have made vows to each other as friends, which is, yeah. I think that in a maybe very roundabout way, that this is one of my weirder ideas. I don't know. Like this might even like provide us with a way of thinking about people who are dealing with this kind of temptation, which is that, like, obviously as conservative Christians, we're not going to like accept gay marriage, but like the idea of like men or women making vows to each other that they will remain faithful to each other, and like living in like a chaste bond of like friendship and loyalty, that is not against the Christian religion. Obviously, if you were to call it marriage and, bring into it all sorts of like sexual sin, then that's a problem. But like guys making vows to each other and even raising children together, that's just a very small monastery.
Yeah.
And so I'm saying this not so that we could say like, oh, you can, just do this, but in the sense that like people who are in these situations can become very lonely, from what I understand. And we should, try and think like, what can we actually do for these people, rather than, just say, oh, well, just live by yourself for your whole life, tough it out. Especially we as Protestants who don't really have any sort of like monastic option for them. Something to keep in the back of our heads, I guess. We'll carry on verse 18 up to verse, let's say 25.
Okay. 25. Okay. Then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. On the third day, go down quickly to the place where you hid yourself when the matter was in hand, and remain beside the stone heap. And I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot at a mark. And behold, I will send the boy, saying, go find the arrows. If I say to the boy, look, the arrows are on this side of you, take them. Then you are to come. For as the Lord lives, it is safe for you, and there is no danger. But if I say to the youth, look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever. So David hid himself in the field. And when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat, as at other times, on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side, but David's place was empty.
And so we see here, the king seems to be a little bit paranoid, perhaps. He's got his back to the wall so that people can't sneak up behind him, and he's got the head of the army by his side. Well, I mean, maybe that's because it's a place of honor. But David's place was empty, which sort of speaks to like what a weird social situation they've got set up here, because I mean, David keeps coming back despite the fact that Saul keeps trying to kill him. Talk about a hostile work environment. But this appears to be the breaking point. Let's see. Let's continue on to 29.
Yet Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, something has happened to him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son, why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table.
So now two of Saul's children are just lying to him. Now,
yeah.
Meanwhile, so as for the cleanliness thing, basically, if you were ritually unclean, you couldn't come to, different religious functions. But there was a provision for being able to participate in them after the fact. For example, the Passover was in the first month of the year, but if you were unclean when the Passover was supposed to happen, you could actually celebrate it in the second month of the year. And so it seems like there was a similar sort of provision for this one as well. Like when David at first doesn't show up, Saul says, oh, well, he just can't arrive because he's unclean. But later he's like, he's still not here. Why isn't he here now? Yeah. So let's continue on to 34.
Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore, send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David because his father had disgraced him.
So Saul's paranoia has sort of hit its peak here. I mean, it seems that he's even worried that his wife is cheating on him, presumably with David, I guess. There's no evidence that this is occurring. Now, later, David does marry a woman who has the same name as Saul's wife, but I think that that's just a coincidence. They have a different last name, so to speak. That is, Saul's wife's name was like Ahinoam, Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz, or something like that. And David's wife's name was Ahinoam of Jezreel. So probably a different person, especially considering that they get married when Saul is still alive. Probably just a coincidence. But yeah, Saul's getting a little worried here. And he has, revealed himself to Jonathan, and once again missed the mark, sort of sinned against Jonathan, if you will, throwing his spear at him and failing to hit him. So continue on to the end of the chapter.
Okay. In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him a little boy. And he said to his boy, run and find the arrows that I shoot. As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy came to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy and said, is not the arrow beyond you? And Jonathan called after the boy, hurry, be quick, do not stay. So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing, only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, go and carry them to the city. And as soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever." And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city.
So David bows 3 times to Jonathan, which is the sort of homage that you would give to royalty. And so we see here that David, it's not that he's unwilling to become king, but he's very unwilling to seize the kingship. Like, there's definitely a sense, as we'll see in the next 10 chapters or so, that he's not going to attack Saul. He's not going to get the kingship by force. And of course, why should he? If the kingship has been promised to him by the Lord, then why would he make war against Saul? That seems to be his perspective. You could say, from a sort of pragmatic standpoint, although this is a bit of a long con if you're just thinking about it from a pragmatic standpoint, that setting up a precedent of never ever attack the person on the throne, even if you're in the right, is sort of a good precedent to set up. You could say, oh, like I never attacked Saul, so like even if you're in the right, you shouldn't. But I mean, it's a bit of a long con if that's what he's going for, because he is going to spend an awful lot of time in strange countries and in caves and wandering about the countryside. It's not exactly going to be a pleasant couple of years. I mean, by the time he comes back and becomes king, he's going to have like at least 2 more wives than he started with. So I mean, it's going to be a while. But
okay, so the bit where Saul becomes like an animal or whatever, that's coming now. That's coming soon.
What do you mean by becomes like an animal?
Isn't there a part where Saul all of a sudden starts acting like an animal, crawling around on all fours? And
I think you're thinking of something from the book of Daniel. I think that's Nebuchadnezzar who does that.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Saul. Okay.
No,
another madman.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. There's, I mean, Saul's not exactly going to be, mentally stable for the rest of this. At least a couple of times more, he's going to, be hunting after David and then say, oh, you're right. I shouldn't have been doing this, and go home. And then it's going to be a whole thing. But we're in the end game now, so to speak. A mere 11 chapters until the end of 1 Samuel. So, do we have any thoughts before we bring this to a close?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So Psalm, I'm good at Psalm 3. All right, Psalm 59. Deliver me from my enemies. The choir master, according to Do Not Destroy. The Mechtam of David, when Saul sent men to watch his house in order to kill him. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Protect me from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who work evil, and save me from bloodthirsty men. For behold, they lie in wait for my life. Fierce men stir up strife against me. For no transgression or sin of mine, O Lord, for no fault of mine, they run and make ready. Awake, come to meet me, and see, you, Lord God of hosts, our God of Israel. Rouse yourself to punish all the nations. Spare none of those who treacherously plot evil. Each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city. There they are, bellowing with their mouths, with swords in their lips, for who, they think, will hear us. But you, O Lord, laugh at them. You hold all the nations in derision. O my strength, I will watch for you, O God, are my fortress. My God in his steadfast love will meet me. God will let me look in triumph on my enemies. Kill them not, lest my people forget. Make them totter by your power and bring them down, O Lord, our shield. For the sin of their mouths, the word of their lips, let them be trapped in their pride. For the cursing and lies that they utter, consume them in wrath, consume them till they are no more, that they may know that God rules over Jacob to the ends of the earth. Each evening they come back, howling like dogs and prowling about the city. They wander about for food and growl if they do not get their fill. But I will sing of your strength. I will sing aloud of your steadfast love in the morning. For you have been to me a fortress and a refuge in the day of my distress. O my strength, I will sing praises to you. For you, O God, are my fortress, the God who shows me steadfast love. Oh, end the recording now.